Trani. Dr. Eugene P. Trani is a name we all know. He is President Emeritus and University Distinguished Professor at Virginia Commonwealth University. After becoming VCU's president in 1990, Dr. Trani greatly expanded the presence of the university, leading Virginia Commonwealth University to assume a key role in the development of Central Virginia, the state of Virginia, and indeed the country, and growing VCU's national and international presence as a major urban research university. It is no exaggeration to say that Dr. Trani brought our university to maturity and truly launched VCU into the national prominence that it enjoys today. After nearly 2 decades serving as president of Virginia Commonwealth University, Dr. Trani retired from the presidency in 2009. He is the co-author of The Reporter Who Knew Too Much, Harrison Salisbury, and the New York Times, among other books and journal articles. After our discussion today, I know that many of you will want to purchase a copy of Fulfilling the Promise if you don't already have a copy. You will be even more motivated to get a copy when I tell you that our authors today have generously directed that all proceeds from the purposes will go to the VCU Foundation to support scholarships for our students. So buy a book, support a student, get your copy from VCU bookstores. I think you can also get it from UVA Press, and the link should be pasted into your chat box, but you can get it from the bookstores, and I encourage you to do that. And I can assure you that once your book is delivered, you will find yourself with a wonderfully engrossing read. As Dr. Kneebone and Dr. Trani make clear in their introduction, this book, from its very first pages, departs completely from what they describe as, quote, the custom of aging professors writing celebratory histories of their local campuses. This isn't anything like this. You'll find celebrated names, yeah, and you'll find important episodes, you'll find amusing stories from the history of VCU, all that's there. But as Senator Tim Kaine writes in his insightful foreword, the story that Fulfilling the Promise tells about VCU is, as Senator Kaine says, multiple stories about how 2 institutions became one, how that institution has interacted with state government, and how that institution has collaborated with and engaged with its home city to lift our entire region in Central Virginia. Senator Kaine writes that the story of VCU is, quote, an exemplary story of how an urban university strives, struggles, and succeeds in its quest to educate young people and contribute to the broader economic and cultural life of a metropolitan region. So folks, this is no ordinary university history, and you will find many threads of history of Richmond, of Central Virginia, and the evolution of higher education in Virginia and nationally woven into the tale. I know I learned a great deal about Richmond and Virginia that I am really glad to know. I'm delighted to have read the book for that reason, among many others. The book falls roughly into 2 sections. The history of VCU before Dr. Eugene Trani joined the university in 1990, and the history after his arrival from 1990 through 2009. I thought we'd start off our session by asking Dr. Kneebone to tell us a little bit about the first part of the book, and then hearing from Dr. Trani himself about the chapters covering his presidency. So John, would you like to talk a little bit about VCU before 1990?
Sure, thank you, John. VCU, as we explain in the book, is an instance in a larger history of the, as we put it, the fall and the rise of urban higher education. And VCU arrived just at the fall, you might say. The founding institutions, RPI and the Medical College of Virginia, both had big ambitions, but they didn't include merging into one university. The Medical College of Virginia was an outlier in higher education, medical higher education, at the time as an independent medical school without a university affiliation. And nonetheless, the medical school was striving to match other medical schools by moving to full-time faculty, moving to an ambitious research program with constant searching for grant support, some of which offended local physicians who saw the medical school becoming distant from them. The RPI collection of professional schools got its independence from William and Mary in 1962 and set out to become a university. From their perspective, what they needed to do was to add liberal arts, humanities and sciences, history, English, chemistry, biology to the collection of professional schools. Both schools were going on their own directions, and therefore the origins of the school are actually out of a political process. The state of Virginia's government was in the midst of modernization following the collapse of massive resistance to school desegregation, realization that two-party politics was coming, desegregation was coming, and the state was modernizing, turning from agriculture to industry to science, and needed a highly educated population. The legislature in 1964 created a study commission. Study commission was headed by Lloyd Bird of Chesterfield County. Bird was an MCV graduate. And Bird's particular interest was community colleges. And the major outcome of the study commission was the community college system. But along with that was a proposal for a university in the city of Richmond that would merge the medical school and Richmond Professional Institute. The medical school seemed amenable as long as it was a university of the first rate. The major issue for RPI and for the city of Richmond was where would it be located? The legislative delegation from Henrico County fought hard to have the university located in suburbs in eastern Henrico County at the Elko track. And the leaders of RPI effectively argued that no, it should be an urban university. An urban university, by their understanding, was a university located in the city that had an obligation to its city to aid in solving city problems, to use the city as a laboratory, and so on. So when VCU came into being, it came into being defined as an urban university. Problem was, right at that moment, the urban crisis arrived. Cities became places that people were leaving. Cities were places that were losing retail. Cities were places where people thought of them as crime-ridden, and so on and so on. And in the city of Richmond, compounding these processes, suburbanization, and so on, were political battles over annexations that brought in more white residents to prevent a Black majority in city government, which prevented elections in Richmond from 1970 to 77, while the litigation went on, and school desegregation, 1971, with busing to bring about proper desegregated schools. Consequence was white flight. Consequence was a declining tax rate and a university that also, along with cultural issues, battles over the war in Vietnam, the rise of the counterculture, meant that instead of a merged university, you had two different places. The white-coated medical school and the seemingly countercultural hippie university up the way near Monroe Park. What this meant for its first president, Warren Brandt, who came from Virginia Tech, he'd been a chemist previously, was that all of his efforts to bring about one university by way of single identification, and particularly with the centralization of bureaucratic procedures, was seen by people at both campuses as an attack on their integrity. Ultimately, in 1973, the price of getting funding for planning for a new main hospital was that Brandt had to agree to a separate provost for the medical school, allowing the Medical College of Virginia to continue rather independently. Brandt departed in 1974, replaced by Theodore Temple, came from state government, although he'd been on the board of visitors at William and Mary, and it helped to develop a new mission for the medical college after the merger as well. Temple had a reputation for being able to soothe conflicts. They seemed to do that on campus, but in 1976, VCU got nothing from the General Assembly. Temple was so dismayed that he decided it had to do with perceptions of the university around the state. Urban university meant lower class, meant cheap, it meant crime, it meant inner city. And Temple set out to argue that the VCU was actually Virginia's third comprehensive university, following University of Virginia and Virginia Tech. This is actually a formal definition, and VCU did match up to being a comprehensive university. But before he had a chance to take his case to the state, he suffered a heart attack and died. He was just 62 years old. He was followed by Edmund Ackel. Ackel came from the outside. Temple had come from state government and from Virginia Tech. Came from the outside and came from University of Southern California, where he'd been in charge of the medical center there. He had an MD and a dentist degree. He arrived and said he'd been misled. He had been told that this was a full research university. He said, no, it wasn't, and it needed to be built up. Ackel was a rough and gruff president. He pushed, and he pushed to get processes and administrative systems centralized. He made enemies. He fought unnecessarily. He got crossways with the student newspaper, which I think no president really ought to do with students who are a bit smart in their responses and have lots of pages to fill. And yet he pushed the university forward. The problem he had was that Richmond seemed to be going downhill. And in 1979, they developed a master plan, repeated 10 years later, even more in this vein, a master plan that would set up major barriers, dormitories, parking decks around the exterior of the university, would close off the campus to vehicular traffic, centralize it on the library, and in a sense, turn inward away from the city. The 1989 master plan for VCU was very much a turn away from the original idea of an urban university as being engaged with its community, with its neighborhoods. Fortunately for VCU, two things happened. One was the residents of Oregon Hill, a neighborhood to the south of the university, which way back in 1968, when the university was first being developed, had been consigned to oblivion, as the Wayne Commission said the university would spread all the way south to the James River. Oregon Hill fought that and successfully fought the new master plan. They had the entire legislative delegation during the 1989 governor's race. Both Marshall Coleman and Doug Wilder said they opposed the VCU master plan. And VCU was stymied. The city newspapers said that VCU was a gritty inner city university and it now may be consigned to stagnation. And it may be that Richmond, a donut city with thriving suburbs and a hollowed out center, might have been consigned to stagnation as well. And that was when Dr. Trani arrived on campus. And these were the circumstances that he faced when he came here in 1990.
Dr. Kneebone, thank you so much for setting the stage for Dr. Trani's arrival. And what a challenge Dr. Trani faced and the way that you just ended your part of the story. Dr. Trani, would you like to pick up from there and talk about your arrival at Virginia Commonwealth University and how you steered the ship from that point forward?
Thank you. I'm pleased to be with you today, and I express, first of all, my sympathy to the faculty and students of the Center for Life Sciences and the biology department with the recent fire. As the vice provost said, that is not the first fire, but I'll get back to that in a little bit. I want to list some important events in terms of the university, both of our campuses. I came to Richmond from the People's Republic of Madison, Wisconsin. I was the vice president for academic affairs of the UW system. That was my third state capital. I began my teaching career at Ohio State University in Columbus. I then began my administrative career in Lincoln, where the University of Nebraska, Lincoln is located, the capital city of Nebraska. And then before I came to Richmond, was in Madison, Wisconsin. So I really like the atmosphere, the relationship between universities and their capital cities and their state government, and what all of that means. So that was very attractive to Virginia Commonwealth University. Living in Madison, Wisconsin, it was also very attractive that it was not going to have snow daily in the wintertime. But it was, in fact, the university that drew me. When I first got here, I recommended to the board, and they accepted my recommendation, that we build a university-wide culture of a single university with multiple strong parts, 2 campuses, what is now called the Monroe Park campus and used to be called the academic campus, which really got out under the skin of our colleagues at the MCV campus. So we changed the name at some point, with multiple strong areas on both campuses: medicine, allied health, arts, social work, among others. What we needed to do was grow inter-campus programs, and eventually life sciences played a major role in that. The second part of that decision was that we recommended to the board that we stay in the city with our 2 campuses, and that we figure out what we can do with both of them to expand, and also no major branch campuses around Virginia. The most important decision for the university was to grow enrollment from a commuter part-time university to a residential full-time university. Enrollment went from 21,764 in the year 1990 to 32,284 in 2008. We were an in-state institution in terms of the preponderance of our students when I started and when I left. 19,727 students were from Virginia in 1990, and 27,714 were from Virginia in 2008. The freshman class went from 1,612 to 3,728, with only 912 from the Richmond area. Lots of students from across Virginia, in particular, Northern Virginia, came to VCU. The most important academic decision for the Monroe Park campus was to set up the School of Engineering, now the College of Engineering, which has grown from 500 students to over 2,000 students. That school, plus VCU Life Sciences, led to the real academic collaboration with the MCV campus. And I'll talk a little more about that in a minute. One other question that I'd like to say was important for Virginia Commonwealth University. I was at Ohio State. I was at the University of Nebraska. I was at the University of Wisconsin, and I'm a graduate of the University of Notre Dame, all big-time football players. And I made the early decision that we would not do football. And in fact, my statement was not on my watch. but concentrate on the rich history of men's basketball, which led to tremendous community support, great student support, significant support from the alums, and significant support from the faculty and staff at the medical center. And in fact, the Final Four run in 2011 capped all of that out, and the hiring of coaches Jeff Capel, Anthony Grant, Shaka Smart, Will Wade, and now Mike Rhodes made that the right decision for VCU. Most important decision for the MCV campus in the years I was president was to set up the MCV Hospital Authority in 1996 and convert it to the VCU Health System Authority in the year 2000. All clinical operations were under the MCV Hospital Authority, and when it became the VCU Health System Authority, it brought along the physicians as well. It is a public authority. It is much like a county government. It has its own board, the president, the vice president for health sciences, 5 members of the Board of Visitors, but then separately appointed board members by the governor, by the Speaker of the House, by the Senate, and 5 physicians also appointed by the governor, by the Speaker, and by the Senate. And they run the clinical operations. The other significant thing that was very important for the MCV campus and VCU Health, as it is now known, was to set up Virginia Coordinated Care in 2000 to work with community physicians who would see local patients for regular health care. And by the year 2008, 20,000 patients were enrolled in that. It was fine to locate outpatient facilities away from the downtown campus, but the downtown campus is important with the major hospital, a second children's hospital that is now under construction, and a major expanded ambulatory care center, all of this on the downtown campus. Among the most important political decisions for the MCV campus was to shut 12th Street, which resulted in the Gateway building, a new front door for the hospital. And that plus the Monroe Park campus not going south into Oregon Hill and north on Broad Street, led by the Siegel Center, and moving east of Belvedere with both engineering and business, began to firm up what the two campuses were and what was in them. And I emphasize again that all of the teaching and research is part of Virginia Commonwealth University, but it is the clinics, the physicians.
Enter your meeting ID followed by pound.
That is part of the VCU Health System Authority. Final important decision was the area around the MCV campus, and that was to build the Virginia Biotechnology Research Park, which resulted in the expansion of the MCV campus with new buildings for nursing and allied health professions. So there was room for the medical center to grow. Now I would like to turn specifically to life sciences and talk a little bit about how VCU Life Sciences came about. I am a narrative historian. I work largely on American-Russian relations in the first half of the 20th century. I've had 4 books come out in that area. I also work on universities in economic development. Twice I wound up at the University of London, and all I kept hearing about was, in fact, the Cambridge phenomena and the University of Cambridge. So in the Easter term of 1998, I went on a sabbatical. Grace Harris, our extremely good provost, who had her own history at Virginia Commonwealth University, denied admission into our Masters of Social Work program as a graduate of Hampton University, and became acting president from the time I was gone, which was April until July. When I came back, I wrote a report that the Chamber of Commerce and VCU published entitled Richmond at the Crossroads, the Greater Richmond Metropolitan Area and the Knowledge-Based High-Tech Economy of the 21st Century. I concentrated on a book of American-Russian relations called The First World War. People mute. Well, I worked on a book on American-Russian relations, but I also looked at this Cambridge phenomena, which has allowed Cambridge University to become an engine for economic development for the whole United Kingdom. And I learned a number of different things. What I learned was a tremendous focus on leadership at the departmental level at Cambridge University. The hiring of great professors and researchers. Strong departmental leadership, a strong focus on interdisciplinary work between the physical sciences, engineering, and the life sciences, and many interdisciplinary programs. So when I came back, I said, gee, if they can do that in Cambridge, why can't we do that here at Virginia Commonwealth University? Because what we had at Virginia Commonwealth University was a medical center, a developing school of engineering, a developing biotech research park. So between 1998 and the year 2001, the following things happened. I was on my sabbatical leave. I came back and wrote this report. In 1999, the Life Sciences Center, to replace the old biology building, which was where the current dining facility is on the Monroe Park campus, had its groundbreaking. On April the 6th of the year 2000, there were two major events in the life of Virginia Commonwealth University. There was the first fire at the Life Sciences Center, under construction then, and the announcement of the genomic sequencing. 2 weeks later, Tom Huff was appointed Vice Provost for Life Sciences. And then in the summer of 2001, Mrs. Inger Rice came to see me one day and talked about a charitable lead trust that she would give to Virginia Commonwealth University because she was so satisfied with what had happened at Virginia Commonwealth University. And oh, by the way, she had what became the Rice Center. She had 300, and I believe it was 29 acres that she was the old Camp Wyandotte, the YMCA camp that she and her husband had purchased. And she didn't know what to do with them. And I asked her if she would be willing to combine these two things to give the charitable forward trust to the Rice Center and what became VCU Life Sciences. And then VCU would, in perpetuity, guarantee that there would never be any commercial development of the Rice Center. So all of that happened in the summer of 2001. And then in November of 2001, the Life Sciences Center was dedicated. And Tom Huff was ensconced, the late Tom Huff, the late great Tom Huff, as Vice Provost for Life Sciences. And I just became a cheerleader where he set up major programs to bring the two campuses together helped develop the Rice Center into what it is today, to set up the Center for the Study of Biological Complexity, the Center for Environmental Studies, and with programs like the Ph.D. program in Integrated Life Sciences. So that's how it actually came to be part of Virginia Commonwealth University. And I think that the College of Engineering and VCU Life Sciences are the two anchors that have brought us together as a university. And it is gratifying for me to see the developments between engineering and the School of Medicine and the School of Pharmacy, and what has happened to VCU Life Sciences. One final comment that I will make has to do with the dedication of the Life Sciences Center. The building, the Board of Visitors generously determined it would be named after Lois and Eugene Trani. Lois was retired from her career as a nurse anesthetist when she came to Virginia Commonwealth University and spent 19 years working at the Massey Cancer Center and hosting activities for the betterment of VCU. 9/11 came right before the building was supposed to be dedicated. I believe it was going to be dedicated on her birthday, September 20th, 2001. We then, after that great tragedy, tried to determine when would we do the dedication of the building, and we came to the decision, why don't we combine it with an invitation to the newly elected governor of Virginia, of the Commonwealth of Virginia. So I had one simple task to do when our new governor came to the dedication of the Life Sciences Center. All I had to do was say, and now it is my pleasure to introduce to you the next governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia, Mark Early, who had been his opponent in the election. And I said, oh, and quick as he was, Mark Warner said, thank you, President John Castine, the sitting president then of the University of Virginia, for that wonderful introduction. And people thought, gee, that was a very interesting setup. It was not a setup, but it shows you how smart and quick Mark Warner was, because he really did save that night. So I think I will stop there and respond to any comments or questions. Sorry I took a little longer, but I thought it was really important to hear the history of that epical period between 1998 and 2002 as to how life sciences got going.
Thank you, Dr. Trani, because your discussion of life sciences tells us a lot about how you shaped Virginia Commonwealth University as a whole with vision and purpose towards certain broad goals that position the university in its own way. And it raises a question that I hope you can talk about. And that is that long ago, one of the audience members from a previous session mentioned that he thought that Temple University in Philadelphia was actually a model for the formation and development of VCU. And we can kind of understand how that happened, because superficially there's a lot of resemblance between the two institutions. There's an urban setting, a major medical campus separated about a mile from the undergraduate campus, a street named Broad Street around which they're all organized, well-recognized professional programs, and so on. So I wonder if perhaps Dr. Kneebone, you could first talk a little bit about whether that's true. And then Dr. Trani, could you talk about your vision for VCU? What framed it? It wasn't Temple. And I'd love to hear more about your thoughts about that. So Dr. Kneebone?
Thank you, John. As a matter of fact, when they began planning the merger of Medical College and Richmond Professional Institute, the State Board of Higher Education did bring a consultant from Temple University. And they made the point that Temple had developed by way of merger, and that it provided Temple success, provided an example that the merger in Richmond could take place successfully. Other than that, though, I don't know that much came of it. The reason that they chose Temple might have been as much because the head of the state council at the time, Prince Woodard, was from Temple University. He later was president of Mary Washington. But I think that, as Dr. Trani could probably explain better than I can, in the long run, and unexpectedly in 1968, in the long run, it was the University of Pennsylvania, the Ivy League school in Philadelphia, that became something of a model for VCU. I'll leave that for Dr. Trani.
Yeah, the two examples that really impacted me in the years I was president was the University of Pennsylvania and the University of Southern California, both elite research universities located in major American cities, in obviously Philadelphia and Los Angeles. Under the leadership of Judith Rodin in the 1990s, the University of Pennsylvania went through a dramatic shift in terms of its relationship with the community. Before she got there, they were actually building buildings facing to the inner courtyards away from the streets. And she said, we're not going to do any more of that. We are a city university. We're not going to shut any streets that we don't have to accept related to the medical center. And we're going to buy West Philadelphia. We're going to hire West Philadelphia. So she really had a community orientation for an Ivy League institution. And that really impacted me. The other example was what happened at the University of Southern California. My first administrative boss was an individual called Steve Sample, who was the vice president for academic affairs at the University of Nebraska and hired me. He then went on to be president of the University of Buffalo, part of the SUNY system, and then went out to Southern California for a 19-year career, which almost overlapped completely my career at Virginia Commonwealth University. And as Steve Sample said, that the University of Southern California is not going to be purchased by equity holders and moved to Tucson, Arizona. It is going to be where it is. And they had to make relationships with their community. And I haven't kept up with what's been going on at the University of Southern California, although it is now a major research university. But at one point, they did not participate in a united way, but rather contributed much more than they would have contributed to the united way to work with their community. So these were the two examples. There were other examples of universities that I looked at. The University of Alabama at Birmingham, the University of Alabama Medical Center had always been located in Birmingham, and they set up a campus of the University of Alabama and set it up as the University of Alabama at Birmingham. But I don't think it's nearly as effective as an integrated university as Virginia Commonwealth University is. And the other one was the University of South Florida in Tampa, which I got to know an awful lot about because we had a place in Treasure Island, Florida, in Pinellas County, where St. Petersburg is located. And they started the whole university in the outer ring of the city of Tampa, but have moved over the recent years to become dramatically more involved with their community. So those were the examples, Dr. Ulmschneider, that I thought about and used and tried to bring those ideas to Virginia.
Well, thank you, Dr. Trani. And the result shows, Virginia Commonwealth University is one of only a few R1 very high research universities, that is also a Carnegie community engaged institution, and community engagement was a broad and important theme of your presidency that's continued into the present.
And is a public university to boot.
It has that obligation to engage. And that reminds me of another question that we had at an earlier session, Dr. Trani. One of our attendees noted that even during an era of massive resistance, that Virginia Commonwealth University and beyond after that was intent on hiring upper administrators, people like Murray DePillars and Grace Harris and Ulmschneider and Henry Rohn, African-American leaders coming to Virginia Commonwealth University. And that person asked, was that, do you think, a conscious and active response to the political environment of the time, a way that Virginia Commonwealth University could advance equity and understanding of racial access at the time? Or did we just stumble into that? What do you think?
No, I think it was a conscious effort to make our senior leadership more representative of our community. And certainly Grace Harris and Alvin Schexnayder and Mary DePillars and Henry Rohn and Rod McDavis, who succeeded Grace Harris as provost and went on to a long career as president of Ohio University, are all examples of that. But there were other things that were done quite clearly. We pushed forward a program in terms of capital construction. You cannot have quotas in capital construction, but you can certainly set guidelines. And the guideline that we set in terms of capital construction for minority and women contractors was 20%. And that has been exceeded over and over and over again. And then the other program that I mentioned was the Virginia Coordinated Care and the relationship between VCU and the community patients and the community physicians. So all of that was part of a real effort, at the same time recruiting more and more diverse students, and that has continued with now dramatic Northern Virginia populations, particularly Asian populations who are studying at VCU. But we also had to get areas of great interest, and the life sciences now I think is the largest undergraduate major at Virginia Commonwealth University. So these students do not want to be in Charlottesville or Blacksburg or Williamsburg. They want a city, but they want a city with a university that is engaged with its community, where they can feel the community. And that certainly is what Virginia Commonwealth University has become.
Thank you, Dr. Trani. I wonder if we could just switch gears just a little bit, because early on, Dr. Trani, you talked about bringing together the two campuses over time and how important sports was to that, basketball. But I wonder, Dr. Kneebone, if you could talk a little bit about this to me. Clearly, VCU has for a long time had two campuses and two cultures, and it was difficult to bring them together. And, you know, it's a theme that's a lot bigger than just the Grove Avenue Republic. So, for instance, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the Grove Avenue Republic, the two kinds of cultures on the campuses, and how they eventually came together.
Well, it was truth to it, but there is stereotyping as well. We should point out, too, that until the 1976 opening of the downtown expressway, people commuting from the west end of Richmond to jobs downtown generally came down Franklin Street. And those wonderful houses, they're now offices for administrators on Franklin Street, were dormitories. And commuters passing through saw not only students hanging around the front porches of their dormitories, but they were just a block away from Gray Street, the center of the counterculture in the city of Richmond. So for a lot of these straight-laced folks, traveling through the campus was kind of an anthropological expedition to see what you might see in the way of people. And certainly the beginning, the folks at the medical college saw themselves as very different, professional, mature, as against the undisciplined hippies at the academic campus. But that changed, and it changed in two ways. One, that the styles of the counterculture became so widespread that, as Lee Zacharias, a novelist who was in the English department back then, put it, it was hard to tell the young Republicans from the SDS members by the way they dressed. But just as importantly, if you went to the academic campus, you saw plenty of people who were dressed responsibly, looked like they just come from work or they're on the way to work. And in fact, that was true. This is a commuter campus, and you had people who came and went during their workday to get to class as well. So there was a lot more seriousness than might be seen. But one legendary aspect, and you mentioned it, John, was the Grove Avenue Republic. The blocks of Grove Avenue closest to the academic campus, where students lived and played loud music and had parties and closed off the block in order to party in the street. And of course, at that time, the VCU Police Department was essentially non-existent, and the City of Richmond Police Department saw students as likely to be communist troublemakers and went after them. And so the parties were raided by police, calling out President Brandt, the first president, to go there to try and calm things down. The most notorious event actually occurred the night of a poetry reading by Allen Ginsberg. Ginsberg was reading and chanting at the Franklin Street Gym, and someone gave him a note that he read to the crowd, an announcement of a party at the Grove Avenue Republic with free beer, which was certainly to bring a crowd. And consequently, there was an immense crowd. President Brandt was called out. He recalled in an interview that when the police came, the crowd rushed into a house, and he was effectively picked up, carried through the house, and deposited in the backyard by the crowd. The consequences were that this became legendary, and yet the reality was that VCU and its neighboring neighborhood, the Fan District, had to work hard over the years to develop a good relationship that allowed for Harrison Street not to be a boundary, but to be an open connection between the campus and the neighborhood back then. But there are plenty of people from back in the day who remember fondly references to the Grove Avenue Republic.
Thank you, John. It's a great story, an amusing story. And it ties into something that maybe we could close with, talking about the effect of universities. Dr. Trani, you worked hard to create a university with enormous, gigantic impact on our region, on the state, and on the country. But recently, there have been, past few years, an increasing number of people are casting doubt on the value of higher education and higher education institutions, feeling that they're elitist, they're not really worth it. What's their real value? So can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, you never got carried out on a crowd of students, on the shoulders of students, but you focused on the kind of involvement that students can do with the community. So can you talk a little bit about what you would tell public and policymakers about how crucial institutions of higher education are to the challenges that we have today?
I think they are very significant. There's no doubt they're going to change somewhat. There will be no doubt more Zoom meetings and some use in instructional areas. But institutions of higher education are among the most important resources that a city could have. I believe as important, if not more important, than airports, highways. These are the knowledge-based centers. And this is what Virginia Commonwealth University is. So all you got to do is walk around both campuses and you're going to see. I am going to conclude by saying this book that we think has been well published by the University of Virginia cost only $35 for that hardback edition that Dr. Ulmschneider holds up periodically. It has a wonderful introduction by Tim Kaine, Senator, forward. It has dust jacket comments by a number of people. Shaka Smart, the basketball coach, who led us to the Final Four. Roger Gregory, the chief judge of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit and a former rector of VCU. Susan Gooden, the dean of the L. Douglas Wilder School of Government and Public Affairs. David Baldacci, award-winning novelist and a 1982 graduate. And John Castine. And this is what John Castine says: for anyone who cares about Virginia, Richmond, VCU, and their people, this is the book. It rings true, yet it tells the intensely personal experiences of the women and men who conceived and crafted a great university for the Commonwealth. And that is Commonwealth University is a great university for the Commonwealth. So all the royalties from this book are going to the VCU Foundation for student scholarships. And Dr. Kneebone and I could not be happier about that. Buy the book.
Thank you so much, Dr. Trani. Buy the book. And truly, you'll find it full of very interesting stories and fascinating stories. And thank you all so much for joining us here today. I hope that you'll go out and buy the book, and I hope that you'll read it. You'll learn a lot when you do. Thank you so much, and goodbye.
Dr. Trani, if you're still there.
Yes.
I was wondering if that was the real John Castine or whether that was Mark Warner who wrote that endorsement.
It was good.
John Castine, and he really appreciates what VCU has become.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think Mark.
Stay safe. Everybody stay safe. Be careful.
Yes. Yep. All right. Good to see you, Rob.
Thanks,
Bye.
John, and excellent work. We'll continue to spread the word about this great book.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.